I was wrong about my son. Not in the way a father is wrong when he pushes too hard, or expects too much, or fails to say I love you often enough. I was wrong in the way that only a fool can be with his eyes wide open and his heart deliberately shut. Let me tell you how I found out. My name is Walter. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years working as an electrician, not the kind who sits in an office drawing blueprints, but the kind who climbs into attics in August and crawls under houses in January. I retired with a bad knee, a decent pension, and the belief that I had done right by my family. My wife, Carol, passed 4 years ago from a heart condition we didn't catch in time. When she left, she took with her the only person who had ever truly known me. After Carol died, my son convinced me to move in with him. My son, who I'll call by his name Marcus, was 41 at the time, married, with a house in a suburb outside of Columbus. He made a decent living doing something in finance that I never fully understood, no matter how many times he tried to explain it to me. His wife, a woman named Renee, smiled the way people smile in real estate photos. Wide, practiced, showing all the right teeth. I want to be clear about something, because this is the part that matters. I did not move in with Marcus because I needed to. My body still works. My mind still works. Carol and I had owned our home outright for 12 years before she passed, and I could have stayed there alone. I chose to leave because Marcus asked me to, and because after 38 years of marriage, a quiet house feels less like peace and more like punishment. I should have stayed in my house. Marcus picked me up on a Sunday with a rented trailer and a reason for every question I asked about the timing. "We'll rent your place out," he said. "The rental income will help you, Dad. You shouldn't be alone. You don't need all that space." I said yes to each of these things the way old men say yes when they are grieving and tired, without reading the fine print. The first year was tolerable. I had my own room, my own bathroom, and the freedom to come and go as I pleased. Renee cooked dinner most nights and I stayed out of her way. Marcus and I watched football on Sundays and talked about the old days. It felt, for a while, like something real. The second year, things shifted in ways I noticed, but didn't name. Marcus began asking me to watch the house during the day, while Renee was at her job as a dental hygienist. Then he asked me to take over the grocery runs, then the dry cleaning, then the school pickup for their daughter, my granddaughter, who was 7, and the only genuinely pure thing in that house. I didn't mind the granddaughter. I minded that no one had asked me. Things were simply arranged. The way you arrange furniture moved into place without consultation and expected to stay there. When I brought it up with Marcus one evening, he looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Patient, slightly tired, the expression of a man explaining something obvious to someone who should already understand. "Dad," he said, "you're living here for free. We're not asking for much." I sat with that sentence for 3 days. Living here for free, as if I were a charity case. As if the arrangement had been his generosity and not my sacrifice. What I did not yet know was how much more he believed I owed him. It was a Thursday in March when Marcus suggested we get lunch. He said it casually. "The way you mentioned the weather," said he'd found a good diner about 20 minutes away, out near the fairgrounds, and that he had the afternoon free. I thought it was an olive branch. I thought maybe he had sensed the tension between us and wanted to smooth it over the way men of his generation do, by eating something and calling it conversation. We drove out together, and the diner was the kind of place I like. Old booths, coffee served in ceramic mugs, a pie case by the register with 3 kinds of pie, and a handwritten sign. The hostess called us honey and darlin' in the same sentence. I felt the knot in my chest loosen a little. We sat across from each other, and Marcus ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted. I let it go. I had been letting things go for 2 years. He talked about work for a while. Something about a client portfolio and a restructuring. I nodded at the right moments and drank my coffee. And then, about halfway through my turkey melt, Marcus set down his fork and pulled out his phone and slid it across the table to me. "I need you to sign something," he said. On the phone was a photograph of a document. I couldn't read it clearly on the small screen, and I told him so. "It's just a power of attorney," he said. "Basic stuff. It means if anything ever happens to me, you can make decisions on my behalf. It protects the family." "I'm not signing something I can't read," I said. "Dad." The patient expression again. I had a lawyer draw it up. It's standard. Then it'll still be standard after I read it, I said. Something moved across his face. Just for a second. Not anger exactly, more like recalculation. He picked up his phone, pocketed it, and said, "We'd deal with it later." We finished lunch without speaking much. On the drive home, I watched the flat Ohio landscape move past the window and tried to remember the last time I had felt like myself. 2 weeks later, Marcus asked me to sign again. This time he had printed the document and set it on the kitchen table with a pen. It was 3 pages long and filled with language I would need a dictionary to parse. I told him I wanted to take it to my own attorney before signing anything. "You don't have an attorney," he said. "I'll get one," I said. He left for work without another word. That evening, I folded the document and put it in the inside pocket of my winter coat, which hung in the back of my closet behind my good slacks and a box of Carol's things I hadn't been able to open yet. I didn't sleep well that night. Something about the whole exchange sat wrong with me. Not like a disagreement between a father and son, but like a man realizing he has walked into a room and the door behind him has quietly closed. What happened next was the kind of thing you couldn't plan if you tried. About 10 days after the document incident, Marcus came home from work on a Friday afternoon and said he needed to run errands. He asked if I wanted to ride along. I said yes, because the alternative was sitting in the house with Renee, who had recently begun sighing when she walked past whatever room I was in, as though my presence required extra oxygen she hadn't budgeted for. Marcus drove to the hardware store, and I waited in the car. He came back with 2 bags. He drove to the dry cleaner, and I waited again. Then he pulled into the parking lot of a pharmacy on the corner of a street I didn't recognize, and said he'd be 5 minutes. He was gone for 25. I got out of the car because my knee was stiffening and I needed to walk. I went into the pharmacy and picked up a basket out of habit. I walked the aisles slowly. I found the vitamins and stood there reading labels the way old men do when they're killing time. And that's when I heard my name. "Excuse me, are you Walter Briggs?" I turned around. A woman in her mid-50s, maybe. Gray-streaked hair pulled back. She was wearing a pharmacy vest over a sweater, a name badge that said Donna, and an expression that was trying very hard to be neutral, and not quite making it. "I am," I said. She glanced toward the front of the store, then back at me. She took 1 step closer and lowered her voice. "Your son is at the pharmacy counter," she said. "He comes in regularly. I've seen him with you in here before you waited by the magazines." She paused. "I recognized you. I almost didn't say anything. But I've been thinking about this for 2 weeks, and I can't not say it." I felt my stomach drop before she said another word. "He's been picking up prescriptions in your name," she said. 3 times in the last 2 months. He told the pharmacist he had your permission. He has your insurance card." She looked at me steadily. "I don't know what's going on in your family, sir, but I thought you should know." I stood very still among the vitamin bottles. "What prescriptions?" I said. She shook her head slightly. "I can't tell you that. I shouldn't have said this much. But if I were your daughter, if you were my father," she stopped, straightened up, became professional again. "I'm sorry to bother you. Please take care of yourself." She walked away down the aisle, and I stood there holding my empty basket until I heard the automatic doors open and close at the front of the store. Then I set the basket down on the shelf next to the B vitamins and I walked to the front of the pharmacy counter. Marcus was standing there, signing something on a small screen. He did not see me until he turned around. The expression on his face in that half second before he composed himself was the most honest thing I had seen from him in 2 years. It was fear, clean and direct, there and then gone, replaced by his regular face. "Dad," he said. "I told you I'd be right out." "What are you picking up?" I said. "Just my blood pressure medication," he said. He held up the paper bag. "Under what name?" I said. A pause. "Very small." "Mine," he said. "Who else's?" I looked at him. He looked at me. We drove home without speaking, and I spent the next 4 days understanding that I was living in a situation that had edges I had not yet found. I did not confront him. Not yet. I had spent my entire working life around electrical systems, and the first thing you learn is that you don't touch a live wire until you know how it's grounded. You find out what you're dealing with before you put your hands on it. I called my doctor on Monday morning from my cell phone, standing in the backyard by the fence where Marcus couldn't see me from the windows. I asked them to check whether any prescriptions had been processed in my name or billed to my insurance in the last 6 months without my knowledge. There was a long pause on the phone. "Mr. Briggs," the nurse said, "I'm showing 3 prescriptions billed to your insurance in the past 60 days. A blood thinner, a sleep medication, and an antibiotic. Our records show they were called in by a physician we don't have on file for you." I thanked her and asked her to flag my account and document the call. She said she would. I sat down on the back porch step with my hands on my knees and thought about my son. I thought about who he had been at 9 years old, following me around the garage while I worked. I thought about how Carol used to say, "That boy has your hands, but he'll have to find his own compass." I thought about how I had not understood what she meant until right then. I called the attorney's office that afternoon. Not the one Marcus had mentioned. I didn't know who that was. I called a man named Gerald, who had done Carol's estate paperwork, and who I trusted because he wore bad ties and never tried to seem smarter than he was. Gerald called me back within the hour. I told him about the document Marcus had asked me to sign. I described it as best I could from memory. Gerald was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Walter, do you still have that document?" I did. Still in my coat pocket. I drove to Gerald's office the following day while Marcus was at work, and Renee was at the dental practice. I sat across from Gerald at his desk, with the document between us, and watched him read it the way I had once watched doctors read Carol's test results, very carefully, not reacting. When he finished, he took off his glasses and set them on the desk. "This is not a standard power of attorney," he said. "This would give Marcus control of your financial accounts, your medical decisions, and importantly, your right to enter into or exit any real estate agreements on your behalf." I stared at him. "He'd essentially be able to make decisions about your property as if he were you," Gerald said, "including your home in Maplewood, my house, Carol's house, the one Marcus had convinced me to rent out." "Gerald," I said, "who is renting my house right now?" Gerald looked at me. "I don't know." "Are you not receiving the rent income?" I was not. Marcus had told me it was being deposited to a joint account he had set up for convenience, and that it was covering my share of the household expenses. I had not asked to see the account. I had not asked to see anything. I had been a man who trusted his son, and I had not asked to see a single thing. Gerald spent the next week making calls I couldn't make myself. What he found took my breath in a way that only happens when something you hoped wasn't true turns out to be exactly as bad as you feared. My house in Maplewood had been listed as a short-term rental under a management company Marcus had formed 18 months earlier. The rental income, which had been substantial, because it was a 3-bedroom in a good school district, had been going directly into a business account in Marcus's name. Not a joint account, not an account I had any access to or knowledge of. His account. Beyond that, Gerald found a trail that extended further than I expected. Marcus had been using my insurance information to bill for prescriptions he was reselling. He had opened 2 credit cards in my name, not using them heavily, but using them, and he had used my social security number as a co-signer on a business loan he had taken out the previous year. I sat in Gerald's office on a Thursday afternoon in April, and I listened to all of this, and I did not cry. I don't say that to sound strong. I say it because I think I had already done the grieving somewhere in the previous few weeks without knowing that's what it was. "What do I want to do?" Gerald asked. "I want to know everything first," I said. "All of it. Before I do anything." He nodded. "That's wise." It took another 10 days. During those 10 days, I lived in my son's house and ate at his table and watched football with him on Sunday and said nothing. I don't know how I did it. I think the same thing that keeps a man on a roof in a thunderstorm when he's got a job to finish kept me sitting in that living room being ordinary. You put one foot in front of the other because the alternative is falling. What gave me the most difficulty was my granddaughter. She was 7, and she had done nothing wrong. And she had her mother's cheekbones and her father's laugh. And she called me Pop-Pop, and liked to sit next to me in color while I watched the news. I had to be very careful in those 10 days. Not to let what I knew change how I looked at her. I managed it. I think. Gerald finalized everything on a Thursday. He had a meeting with a detective he knew at the Columbus Financial Crimes Unit. He had documentation of the insurance fraud, the unauthorized credit accounts, and the rental income diversion. He told me the detective was interested. He also told me something else. Something I had not expected. Carol had a revocable trust, Gerald said. She set it up 18 months before she died. She put your Maplewood property into it. She named you as the sole beneficiary and trustee. He paused. She also named me as successor trustee in the event you became incapacitated. Or, and these are her words, in the event you signed anything that compromised your interest in the property without Gerald's prior review. I stared at him. She came to me alone, Gerald said. She didn't tell you because he stopped. Looked at the desk for a moment. She told me she didn't want to worry you. But she wanted the house protected. She said she wasn't sure why she felt that way. She just did. Carol, who had been gone 4 years, who had sat across from Gerald in this same office, and thought about a future I was now living in, and done what I hadn't known to do myself. The power of attorney Marcus had asked me to sign would have been meaningless. The house was never mine to sign away. Carol had seen to it before she left. I put my hands over my face and sat like that for a while. Gerald didn't say anything. He has the rare quality of knowing when silence is the correct thing to offer. When I looked up, I said, "What happens now?" "Now," Gerald said, "is up to you. I did not want to destroy my son. That is the truth, and I want to be clear about it, because I think some people will hear this story and want a different answer. I wanted my son to understand what he had done. I wanted him to face it. I wanted the people he had harmed, and Gerald confirmed there were others. 2 elderly clients whose accounts Marcus had mismanaged in similar ways to have some recourse. But I did not want to watch my granddaughter's father go to prison. I tell you this not because I think it was the right decision. I'm honestly not sure it was. I tell you because it is what I chose, and I own it." Marcus was confronted by Gerald and the detective together, at Gerald's office, on a Monday morning. I was not in the room. I had asked to be informed afterward. I sat in the parking lot of a coffee shop, 6 blocks away, and drank the worst cup of coffee I have ever tasted, and waited for Gerald's call. It came after 40 minutes. Marcus had not denied it. He had sat very still, Gerald told me, and then he had begun to cry. Not the panicked crying of a man trying to talk his way out of something quieter. Gerald said it was hard to watch. I believed him. The terms were these. Marcus would repay, in full, all rental income he had diverted. He would close every unauthorized account and credit line opened in my name and resolve the balances. He would make restitution to the other 2 clients from his own funds. He would cooperate with the insurance fraud investigation. In exchange, the detective agreed that my decision not to pursue criminal charges against my own son would be documented and respected, provided Marcus met every condition. Renee, when she found out, did not cry the way Marcus had. She screamed. She told Marcus he had ruined their life. She threw a ceramic mug against the kitchen wall at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. My granddaughter was at school. I was in my room with the door closed, listening to the sounds of a marriage being stress-tested and finding out it wasn't built for this. I moved back to Maplewood 3 weeks later. Gerald had handled the renters. They had a 60-day notice, and were apparently not entirely surprised that something had gone sideways, since Marcus had been inconsistent about maintenance requests. The house needed some work. The kitchen faucet had been dripping for 8 months. The back gutter had pulled loose. The rose bushes Carol had planted along the front walk had been neglected into a state that would have upset her. I fixed the faucet myself. I had someone come for the gutter. The rose bushes I worked on for a full weekend in May, cutting back the dead wood, turning the soil, giving them what they needed. It's slower work than electrical, but it's the same principle. You find out what's wrong. You fix it. You don't pretend the problem isn't there just because fixing it is difficult. I sleep well now. I did not realize, until I had it back, how poorly I had been sleeping for 2 years. Marcus called me 6 weeks after I moved out. He didn't say much. He asked how I was. I told him I was fine. He asked about the house. I told him the roses were coming back. There was a long silence on the phone, and then he said, "Dad, I'm sorry." I said, "I know." And I do believe he was. Whether sorry is enough is a question I'm still working on. I suspect I'll be working on it for the rest of my life. My granddaughter comes to see me on alternating Saturdays now. I pick her up, and we go to the diner near the fairgrounds, the one with the pie case and the handwritten sign and the hostess who calls us honey. My granddaughter gets chocolate pie. I get apple. We sit in a booth and she tells me about second grade and I listen as carefully as I have ever listened to anything. She doesn't know what happened between her father and me. She's 7. There's time for the world to be complicated later. Right now, on those Saturday afternoons, it is just pie and a booth and a little girl who still believes her pop-pop is the most capable man she has ever met. I'm working on believing that myself. The pharmacist's name was Donna. I went back to that pharmacy 3 weeks after I moved home and I asked to speak with her. She came out from behind the counter with the same cautious expression she'd had in the vitamin aisle. I thanked her. I told her what she had said mattered. She nodded once, very precisely, and said, "I'm glad it helped." Then she went back to work. That's how it goes, most of the time. The people who change things do it quietly, in the middle of an ordinary day, and then they go back to what they were doing. No one marks the moment. No one knows to. Carol knew to protect the house. Donna knew to say something. And I finally, too late in some ways, and just in time in others, knew to stop saying yes when I should have been reading the fine print. I'm still learning. But then, that's the thing about being wrong. If you're lucky, you find out while there's still time to be something else.